Welcome to another episode of the Columbia County Progress, a podcast brought to you by the Columbia County, Wisconsin Democratic Party. With me today is Blaine Halverson. Blaine is from Menominee, Wisconsin, and will be talking with us about efforts that have been put in place to help local municipalities deal with the data center challenge. Also joining us today is Jim Hazley, chair of the Columbia County Democratic Party. And I'm Mark Stover, just to keep everybody in sync here. So I first of all want to say a special welcome to Blaine. Thank you for coming down from Menominee, Wisconsin today. We appreciate your time and
appreciate being here,
and all the work that you've been doing, actually. So, well, I'd like to start out with just a little bit of background. Our viewers and listeners won't know who you are, probably.
Sure. No.
So, can you just tell us a little bit of background about yourself and what you were doing before you got sucked into the maelstrom of data center stuff?
Well, I grew up in Menominee and went to college to be a minister, and what that ended up turning into, the closest thing to being a minister I was when I had a youth theater company. And I kind of said, well, this is kind of like being a youth pastor in its own way. A very varied career, a lot of different things. And just about 4 years ago, started working in the mental health field and working one-on-one with folks who are dealing with mental health recovery or addiction recovery, which has been very rewarding. And and it's been good for my own mental health to just have those interactions and time on the road, which I enjoy.
Yeah.
And kind of minding my own business, being one of those people who doesn't pay any attention to local government at all, right? And then we were driving in Colorado. We were on vacation, kind of driving from one tourist thing to another. And she was on her phone and she said, hey, they want to build a server farm out on County Road B north of town. And I didn't know what that meant.
Yeah.
I just you've been hearing all about Russian bots and things. So I said, like a troll farm? Like, is that what you're talking about? She goes, no, it's like a data center. And so then I understood server rooms, right? But the data center, the only image I had was from Mission Impossible movies or something like that, where there's big computer rooms and some kind of action scene going on. And that didn't give me any realistic context. I understood that. And it also didn't give me, nothing about the idea of a data center gave me pause. I didn't have any concept of what kind of the impacts could be or anything. So it was just oh, okay. And then she said, well, the deal is that nobody knew this was happening. All of a sudden it's just here.
Yeah.
And nobody even knew. And people are really upset. I said, okay, well, that got my attention a little bit. And we got home and she started really digging into it and reading me things and talking about things. And I said, oh, this is a bigger deal than I thought it was. But what it really was that it started coming out that there had been NDAs that had been preventing people from talking. And then when I went from now we know about it to a week and a half later, they're voting to annex this land from the neighboring town and to rezone it.
So how did you do that original research? How did you find out? Where did you go?
I didn't go anywhere. She did. She went everywhere and she just read me things. Yeah. That. It's funny.
For the record,
you
say she.
My wife, Nicole, who's here with me. Yeah. And she was very adamant about it and concerned about water use and concerned about electrical use. And that is, I call it the gateway drug for most of the people getting into the fight are the water and the power issues. I think when you get into it more and there's more nuance and more depth of understanding, you start to realize that, yes, those are significant issues, but they're much more consequential issues that I think are especially important if you're going to try to motivate your leaders to decide this isn't worthwhile for them. And as a matter of fact, I think that my experience is it seems like when developers come in, they pre-clear some of these objections that they know people are going to have with the town while it's still under wraps, saying, hey, we got to be careful here about getting talking about too much about this yet because people are they're going to get hysterical and they're going to start talking about all the water and all the power. And, the fact is we're using a closed loop system. They kind of pre-clear all that and make everyone feel like they're in the know. Like all of these leaders feel like they're in the know. Yeah. When they're really just trying to create something in there that will drive a wedge, right? When the people get upset and they start getting angry, then those folks just look at them going, oh, they told us they'd get hysterical. And look at them, right? They told us it would be about the water, but we know better. It's a closed loop system. And they just kind of get led down that primrose path. And all of a sudden now, that's just making the people angrier. And it's making, and then they're being confrontational with their leaders, which is making them dig in further. And now nobody's talking to each other and nobody's listening to each other. And that's when it just goes south. Okay. Really fast. So creating that wedge between people in the community. Yeah. Some who are drinking the water, if you will, drinking the Kool-Aid. Yes. And some who are questioning things. Sure. And then you've got that kind of tension. So let's talk as an example within Menominee. Yeah. How did you deal with the issues of people not talking to each other about an important issue that affected everyone? Right. Well, we started a page right before a Facebook page that had been started right before the annexation rezoning hearing, and that was the activating event for me. Was that hearing? Okay. And seeing like 30 people stand up and talk, and only 6 of them were talking in favor. 4 of them were landowners who were selling. One was the chancellor of UW Stout, and one was the economic development coordinator for the county and the city, who is a Stout employee. Just kind of a weird dynamic. Yeah. And seeing them go ahead and move forward with the annexation and rezoning in spite of a 24-6, right? Comparison was really alarming to me. Yeah. And it probably shouldn't have been. I mean, I think that I just wasn't aware that is often how local government works. They just kind of march along because most of the time they're not really under a microscope in most of these local governments. So they just do what they think is best and they move on. So you hadn't been to you weren't a regular attender of county boards or local municipalities? No, when I was like an executive director for a local nonprofit, then I was there occasionally, to represent our interests. But no, it wasn't like a thing that was a feature of my life in any way, shape, or form. And what came out of that meeting, that activated me. Mm-hmm. It upset me. But I also realized really fast when we had our first meeting with 60 people. What I saw there. Now that was a meeting of people who were opposed to the data center annexation. Okay. Yeah, it happened a couple of weeks after that. Okay. And what happened at that meeting was just I noticed what I would call angry villager energy, and for the first time really had felt it myself, but was starting to recognize that this isn't going to serve us. Like we're not going to get anywhere with that energy. It's going to burn bright and fast and be gone, right? Like when you're playing a video game and you're like doing a driving game and you've got that boost. Yeah. And it gives you a big boost, but it's gone in a few seconds. And now you don't have it at all, right? Plus you make other people mad. Yes, exactly. Yeah. Right. So then, what came out of that meeting, because that was where I was vocal in that meeting, a little bit vocal. I was trying to be a voice of reason, which some people just didn't want to hear. Because they were mad and they had the right to be mad. But what came out of that was then some of the people who founded that page, reaching out to others to kind of form a core team. And I got asked to be a part of that. Okay. And at that first meeting, I didn't really want to be a public face in any way, shape, or form. I had been a public face for a job earlier and I didn't like how it turned out. Yeah. So I was wanted to back off of that. But what I noticed is they were all just talking about how we need to recall everybody. Mm. And I said, listen, I understand where you're coming from. And I think that some of these people, if we get into it, that might be true. But my gut tells me that a lot of these people, and if you just look at numbers, some of these people are winning their ward 17-0 because no one's running. Yeah. And they just got asked by their neighbors to represent them. And I just think that most of them really have the community's best interests at heart. They just maybe don't know what they don't know.
Right.
And I got a little razz for that. But then I said, well, someone's like, we're not going to win this. What we need to do is not alienate them. We need to figure out who's gettable, right? Who can we convince? Who can we persuade? And we need to develop relationships. And they're like, do you want to do that? So I said, yeah, sure. I'll do that.
Okay. And
I created a tool for others to encourage them to have the same kind of thing. And what I said was, my approach was going to be to approach people with curiosity, approach them assuming their best intent, right? And giving them a platform to tell their story about their experience through the process.
Now, are you talking about the
council members?
Okay.
Yeah. And just, hey, so when did you first hear about this?
Okay.
And what was your reaction?
And did you do that on a one-on-one basis?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mostly over the phone. I met with a couple people in person, but mostly it was over the phone. It's one of the advantages of my driving job is I can do a lot of those conversations on the road, which is actually nice, and it makes the time go too. So I was getting a lot of similar stories, but not similar in a way that people were comparing notes, similar in a way that you're like, yeah, this is a true account, right?
Okay.
What I was recognizing was what I would call the ignorance that comes from hubris. Right? Like the hubris of thinking you have all the information and you don't, and how dangerous that is, right? It's the whole, it's the iceberg that's under the surface. That's the danger that's going to sink you. Not the little part that's sticking up. But I didn't call people out for it. I just asked questions. And when I started it, I just said, I really just want to ask you questions and hear from you. And then when we're done, I might have a few things for you to think about. Yeah. And that's what I would do. And then at the end, I would turn it around and give them a few things to think about. Like for one, I hear you saying that NDAs, are considered a kind of a common thing or like a standard procedure. I would argue with you that is absolutely true for multi-billion-dollar tech companies. An NDA is a standard operating procedure, but it doesn't have to be for us, for our city. Mm-hmm. That does not have to be a standing, and we don't need to let them force us to do that.
And what was their response to that suggestion?
He said, "Yeah, I guess that's true."
Okay.
Yeah, he's now the mayor, that gentleman. And that was a great conversation that ended up becoming a relationship. That is a relationship where we have each other's ear, even now. Like he'll call and ask me questions, and get feedback and I'll tell him what I see, and I'll call him and unannounced sometimes and say, "Hey, I noticed this, and I'm concerned about that."
Well, that seems to me to be the nut of the issue.
I think it is
developing that kind of trust relationship.
I think it is, and I think that's what that's what Prescott Balch did. We didn't even know each other at this time, right? Prescott and I had never met, but that's what he was
to Prescott a little bit.
That's what he was doing in Caledonia. The same kind of thing, like who can we build relationships with and trust with. And it was about a month after these conversations, I was sitting in a town hall with one of the city council members who was holding it. And she was being asked questions, and she said, and there were a couple of questions she had asked. She looked at me and goes, "Blaine, like, do you know the answer?" And I would answer the question. And she was, "See, you guys need to understand, like, this is what she said, I'm not being given any information. Okay. Like, at this city, I'm not getting anything. So I'm actually getting most of my information from people like him," is what she said. So I was like, okay, this is working. They trust me, and I'm intentionally want to be trustworthy, right? I want them to know that if they tell me something in confidence, it's going to stay that way, right? Because it's important that they know that I'm not playing gotcha with them, but I'm also upfront with them, right? Like if you burn me on this, I'll be the first one walking around collecting signatures, that kind of a thing. Yeah.
Now, were the others in the original Facebook group and the group that started to get together, were they also developing those relationships?
No, they were mostly leaving that to me.
Okay.
And I was trying to bring them in a little bit from time to time and let them in. There's just a lot of cynicism, and I don't blame people for that. Yeah. Like they really still, there's still some of them, they got to all go. They just got to all go. I'm like, well, first of all, we have something here, I said, that we haven't seen in any of the other communities, which is council members stopping and turning and listening.
Yeah.
That wasn't happening in Port Washington. It wasn't happening in Beaver Dam. Right? They just bored right through it without anyone knowing. And then after people got mad, they put them down.
Yeah.
They mocked them. They ignored them, had them arrested. That wasn't happening where we were. We were getting a response. And whether they were to come down on our side or not wasn't the point. The point was, we don't know when the vote's going to be. And all we need to do is know that when we pick up the phone, that someone will trust us enough to at least listen.
So trust is a big part of it.
Yeah, I think so.
And it seems to me also education is a part of it.
Huge.
As well. I mean, I mean education in the broadest sense. That,
yeah.
Educating not only city council members, but also citizens.
Yeah, because there's not a lot of nuance right now. Like people have lumped all data centers in together. And I understand that, right? Because it's like, they don't necessarily know how to differentiate. And at some level, they don't need to differentiate. If they see it as a threat to their community, they should be listened to. And if they're wrong, demonstrably, then leaders should care enough to help to explore it with them and get them on board before they move forward. Right. And that's what was most troubling for me. And I think it's one of the most uniting elements of this issue is the one of, hey, our voice should matter.
Right.
Like people believe, right? I think across the parties, people believe that local government should be the most responsive government.
Right. It's your friends and neighbors.
Right.
You know.
Right. And they know your neighborhood. And nobody, it's like, I've been concerned with how much preemption the state has had of local government. And part of it is because, man, there is an enormous difference between someone living in Kenosha County and someone living in Bayfield County. Yeah. It's a night and day cultural life difference. And my experience as someone living in the backyard of Wisconsin, is that we don't get thought about much, right? There's a real a southeast centrist viewpoint of Wisconsin governance, and I've even talked to people from Oshkosh who feel that way. Yeah. That even there sometimes feel like they're on the back burner, right? Mm-hmm. And the whole east part of the state, that was Rust Belt, right? Rust Belt shipping industry. That was never Western Wisconsin. Yeah. Right. Is there industry? Yes. But most of the industry was centered around lumber, paper, right? And agriculture. So, I think there's just a different mindset, and you have to have that local control. And it's funny because there's even some like variance in our group about it, because I'm very much strong. I don't want the legislature to try to fix it, because I don't think they know enough about this to not make it worse. Yeah. And I would rather have them give more controls back. And then their concern is, well, if the state doesn't take action, there's going to be communities that get run over. And what I'm trying to say is, if you could undo these preemptions and give a township the ability to just say no for some simple reasons and not have it make them be afraid of being sued, then that changes things, right? Yeah. A village who's got a $1 million a year budget should be able to just say no to a $1.5 billion project. Right. Right. The percentage they're going to rely on that tax basis is not, it's a risky thing for a community.
I want to come back to the Menominee.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I wander.
This is all good. Because I do want to talk about the issues with the state as well. But through the fall of 2025 and into the early part of 2026, this effort of building trust and educating people and understanding what the issues were continued to build until the mayor said, we're not going to go on any further with balloonist.
Well, that actually happened like just a few weeks into September.
Okay.
To be honest with you, when he got to that point, he had the city administrator send a letter to Balloonist, which Balloonist, by the way, that LLC is the same LLC who first engaged Beaver Dam, right? So these were the same people. And same attorney that represented them. So when he did that, like what he said, they sent a letter saying we're not interested in negotiating a TID at this time. I mean, I think he understood that the TID was fundamental to these people.
Tax incremental district.
Yes, that they wanted the public. They want, well, what it comes down to is they want to put the risk on others. Even though they're the ones that are loaded with all the money, they want the risk to fall, to the taxpayers. They want the risk to fall to the ventured capitalists who are investing in AI. They want the risk to fall on the Alliance and the We Energies and the XL Energies for the expense of the infrastructure. And they want it so badly that they do things like sue the PSC for having to dare pay more for the energy.
Recent Oracle.
Right.
So,
So I think he understood that was going to make them go, okay, well, maybe not. And in the meantime, in that kind of pause area, they started approaching what steps they could take. And one thing they saw was the opportunity to create a zoning ordinance where you're creating a brand new zone that is just for data centers. That is the only place data centers can go.
Now, this is the developers?
No, this is the city.
Council.
Yep. And so they were working with a Madison attorney on that and came up to the conclusion. They called it the Industrial 4 Data Center Technology, or industrial zone. And what it does essentially when you create that is there's no actual land zoned I-4, right? So now what you have automatically is a developer who owns land that's zoned I-1 that would have been suitable for a data center. And you didn't change their zoning. You just created new restrictions or new rules for a land use that you didn't understand.
Yeah.
And now they have to go through rezoning, which is one of the most, that's one of the strongest levers that a municipality has, where they have the most discretion. They have a lot of discretion over whether they say yes or no to a rezoning. So that was and so what they did then is they started creating a handful of performance standards. And they passed that in early January. And then they said, we want the public to weigh in on what else should go into this. And that's a process then that gets them into kind of a pause and study mentality, where they kind of have some legal time, some legal cover to be working on this, as long as they're being active and that it's a good faith effort. And they've been doing that. So, we kind of weighed all in on that in February, March. And now they're working on a zoning amendment. We're hopefully going to see it in July here. But I don't know. And
so we're seeing a lot of local municipalities, local jurisdictions getting into moratoriums.
Yeah.
What happened in Menominee, it sounds like, is they took the zoning route to make sure that they had a chance to do what the moratoria are supposed to do, is give the organizations time to think about what they're doing.
Yeah.
So the outcome in Menominee is still
it's hanging.
Still open.
Yeah. I think what you have there is they spent $28 billion on this land, right? And then some people would say, well, they're not going to just let that go. Well, I mean, to a company like that, $28 million is a rounding error. So it's not really necessarily about that. But if they really want a data center there, they're at least going to hang on and watch and see what we do. Yeah. Right. And my guess is because it's local government and all you need is a favorable election in 2 years. Yeah. Right. I think they're kind of hanging on. I think they'll kind of probably hang on to the land for a while and see what happens. But there's kind of half of the people are convinced that it's inevitable and they've just kind of given up.
Yeah.
The other half are convinced it's over. And neither of those are helpful viewpoints.
See, that's kind of the message that comes out around the state.
They like inevitability.
Took
Yep.
them down.
I know.
Nothing's going to happen.
And I keep every interview I have, they feature Menominee stopped it. And this is one of the guys who helped. And I'm like, we didn't stop it. Like we have a reprieve. And I think that we have an opportunity to stop it. But we don't control that. Like they can just threaten to sue and who knows what happens. Yeah. Right.
So that might be the answer to my next set of questions.
Yeah.
Because so here's the pause. Menominee's not currently moving forward actively on building a data center.
Right.
There's other things happening. Why did you stay in the game and getting involved with other communities around this?
Well, because I got connected.
That would have been the opportunity for most people to just say, okay, I'm done.
Yeah, I think she probably wishes I had, although now I think she feels differently. But
yeah, so
back last autumn, I was introduced to this Signal chat of people from other communities, and I got introduced through a couple people in our group who had found it, and I wandered in, and then in the pause, we lost a lot of energy among our own crew. Mm-hmm. Like life started happening to them and they started backing out one by one. And I found myself the guy who didn't want to be at the front of it. I looked at the ground and saw the ball laying there and looked around and there was no one else to pick it up. And I picked it up. Okay. And I picked it up for about 6 months and it felt pretty lonely for a while. I mean, I could rally some troops every now and then, but when that pause came on, it really allowed a lot of people to feel very ambivalent or give up, thinking there's nothing we can do to stop it anyway. And so it was hard to kind of get people pulled in. But I got pulled into that state group. And what happened there is very quickly, Wisconsin didn't seem big to me anymore, right? It seemed like a neighborhood. And the people in Port Washington were like me, and they were experiencing a lot of the same things I did, but different things that I didn't know about, right? And I had different things that they didn't know about. And pretty soon it was like a new form of generative real intelligence forming, right? Like we were all kind of comparing notes and just massively gaining information to the point now where when a new person or group comes in, we can pass on in a couple of hours information that took several of us weeks and months to learn, right? Which is really valuable.
So what's motivated you to stay involved with, Port Washington, Beaver Dam, Cassville, Rock County? I know you were down in Rock County recently.
Yeah, well, we support each other.
Okay.
Like we admire each other, we respect each other, and we support each other. And, Brittany Keys came all the way up.
Clean Wisconsin.
Healthy Climate Wisconsin.
Healthy Climate Wisconsin.
But she came all the way up, to the Eau Claire event for me to speak. And I came down to Beloit to do the same thing for her. Because I could. But what motivated me to stay in was also just the idea that the only way we're going to stop playing whack-a-mole is if we get on the offense. And there's going to always be whack-a-mole. There's going to be you have to be defensive, but you also have to play offense at the same time. And maybe you need two different groups to do it, right? One that's ready in a heartbeat when something comes up and comes to the surface and you got to deal with it now. And the others who are there trying to actively talk communities who haven't faced it yet and try to get them to take action now. And for me, it became, the trigger point was we had a scheduled call with one of Evers' policy directors. There were about 6 of us who were going to be on a video call about the subject. And we each kind of took our own topic. And we're going to talk for like 4 to 5 minutes each. I think we were getting, and this is in February. And I was going to talk about empowering villages and townships.
Yeah.
That's what I was going to talk about. And in thinking about that subject, I started thinking about the little village my dad grew up in. Dallas, Wisconsin, Berens County, population 400 and something. And all the time I spent there as a kid, right? And walking to the little Lutheran church with my grandma and going to the park with, with the old slide, the one that if you fell off, you could die, right? When my grandpa decided to wax and then he went down in his polyester slacks and almost hurt himself pretty badly. Going to the little general store right? And grabbing milk, 10 feet from a row of shotguns, right? It was just a different place. And I felt connected, and I still feel connected to that village. And it just made me start to think about that what really is at stake here is people's connection to their place, right? That we've seen through history, the intentional effort that gets made to separate people emotionally from that part of their identity. And I see that happening. I see this being something that is doing that to rural America, to the place where when you've driven by the one in Beaver Dam, the scale is insane.
Yeah,
that's not a project that belongs in a town like that. Period. Yeah. And a construction project like that creates literal generational trauma for children who grow up in that area for the years after, because it dominates their life for several years. And it can, in a sense, kind of rob the character from your community in a permanent sense. And so I think that's really what's at play here, is that people have an instinct inside that's telling them something's wrong about this, that this is going to change how my community feels to me, and it's going to make my own town feel foreign to me. Yeah. And I think that's what really is a motivating factor.
Yeah, it's a power.
And so that got me interested in reaching out to the communities around us in Menominee, saying, hey, Menominee's taking action, now you should. Like, let's inoculate the region. Let's get ahead of this. And even if not everybody does, because they won't, you're at least kind of creating a Swiss cheese of a map, right? Where can I get a parcel? Where can I put together a parcel to build this thing? Well, these people have these rules. These people have this, right? And getting people on the same page and thinking of each other as neighbors rather than we're competing for a data center, which is what they want us to do.
So the local municipalities and local towns and villages, are, as you said earlier, are oftentimes, the councils are oftentimes staffed by people who are just volunteering to do good in their community.
Trying to, I think, yeah.
So they don't often, though, get faced with $1 billion or multi-billion-dollar investment scheme. Mm-hmm. And where do they turn to for knowledge about what they have in terms of powers that might be village powers or adopting police powers? How do they learn that?
Well, they have to be willing to ask. And the challenge is often the people who are in opposition are discredited ahead of time. They try to discredit them in advance so that they don't turn to anyone who's coming from the real experience. And it's kind of shocking because you see story after story, like these are documented stories about wells running dry and noise and neurological damage and all of these things. And it's like, don't look behind the curtain kind of a thing. Yeah. So it feels like what I'm seeing, well, for example, there's a regional group up where we live, kind of a regional development group that I went to their page and they have a guide on data centers, and I'm reading it and it clearly was written by the industry. Right. And they're just taking what the industry says about themselves. In Beloit last week, they had earlier this week, Monday, they had a meeting, like the developer did a meeting for the community, and it was an open house because then they can answer the questions one-on-one. No one has to listen to how the question was answered by someone else, right? Which is a divide and conquer kind of approach that no one should tolerate because it's intentional. But they had a sign up that showed a red line and a green line for 3 different categories. And one was noise, one was water use. I can't remember what the third one was. And they were comparing this property where there's a current gravel pit that they're going to want to convert to a data center. And it shows a red line all the way to the end for each of those 3 things for the real impact for the gravel pit as it is. And then a green line that's much shorter with a % improvement. It's going to be this much less. And apparently the traffic is going to be substantially less at the data center than at the gravel pit. which is really stunning. And there's nothing cited on the sign. It's just a sign. And it's just kind of this thing that says, it kind of conveys to anyone who's paying attention, these people are dumb. We can pull one over on them.
Yeah.
And we're not.
So is there a role for the state, or it occurs to me also, the UW Extension, for instance, in terms of providing local government education to help local governments, these volunteers, the neighbors, to get a better handle on the powers that they actually do have?
Yeah, I think there's a role. The problem is it's going to take political will, and it's going to take people putting differences aside, like we are, partisan differences aside, to get something accomplished, right? Instead of putting a bill together that is meant to make your, and both parties have done it, to make their party look good and to put the other party in a position that they know they'll reject it and then they can use it against them, rather than, hey, there's a bill about NDAs. Why can't we just pass that by itself?
Yeah.
Instead of arguing about where the solar should be and not be. Let's put that aside and let's do things that we can do to make progress. And it wouldn't be hard, but people don't have the will. And the other thing is, the problem you have is you've got the governor in lockstep on this whole data center thing. Like, he actually came down to Beloit last week just to say that he thinks that the positives of data centers aren't being talked about enough. And that was really offensive, right? You've got a community there that feels like they're under the gun, and you're coming in and basically gaslighting them. And that was just very disappointing to see. And you have the trade unions are getting a lot from this. This construction is good for them, but I don't think they recognize it. Like, I was just reading an industry article recently that was talking about how the next phase is they're realizing this is too costly and time consuming. And what they need to do is start building these data centers in pre-built, prefabricated modules, and having people and having a smaller crew assembling them on site. And when that happens, then you're not even going to have these union workers getting anything. You're probably going to have people who come directly from the factory and put the thing together.
Equipment, lifts things in.
Right. So there's all that stuff going on then.
So you found in Menominee that building trust and reaching out started to build a citizen, action group that could move things forward. What about citizen action groups moving forward on helping legislate local councils and local members to learn more about data centers, or learn more about not just data centers, but also all of the powers that they have?
Right.
I feel like that's an open opportunity that we're not exploiting it.
No, and that's the next phase for this Uniting West Wisconsin effort.
Okay. This is the Uniting West Wisconsin is the group that you had or are working with that had the big event. That
I started. But I joined up with, and the idea was to create a coalition, right?
With, Great Lakes Neighbors United.
Great Lakes United and Grassroots Organizing, West Wisconsin, GROWW. And then we brought on the Wisconsin Farmers Union, Wisconsin Conservation Voters, St. Croix Cures, Chippewa Valley Indivisible. I'm trying to think of the others. I don't want to leave anybody out, but I'm having a hard time off the top of my head.
Okay.
We had like 9 organizations that are locked in and are part of that. And now it's the next phase. And the next phase is we're leaning into, GROWW has tremendous organizational infrastructure from an organizing standpoint, like a strategy of county teams, right, that can implement and get to work on getting speakers at an event or getting bodies at a meeting.
In fact, they're doing educational webinars on.
They do that, a lot of that, yes. And on Monday, they're actually doing one on the idea of power and how to gather power and where it comes from. And then we're going to lean into on the Great Lakes Neighbors United and the data center people on the education element, right? I'm going to be starting to develop kind of that organizational educational infrastructure.
Okay.
That's going out and doing data center one-on-one events or putting together short videos that help people learn what they need to learn, and also training other people to be able to take on that task, right? identifying people who want to become topic experts on one element or another of data centers and helping them accomplish that so that when there are these big events in our region, we have local people who can be a part of that, and can weigh in on pollution or weigh in on the health elements or the financial risk elements or whatever it is.
Right. Sounds like this is going to be an ongoing effort for you. This is something was a one and done or a 5 and 6 and done. This is now you're seeing this more as a movement.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And that's what we said is the Uniting West Wisconsin was the name of the event, but it was also, we determined in advance would be the name of the movement, for at least the next year is where we kind of started, like looking through into next June. And we're in the process of mapping that out and what it looks like.
Well, now, how can others, how can other organizations get involved? You talked about Indivisible. You talked about several county-level organizations.
Mm-hmm.
What if other groups wanted to connect with you? How would they do that?
I mean, they could just email, me at unitingwestwisconsin@gmail.com, unitingwestwisconsin@gmail.com, and ask, we're hoping that this effort will inspire others to do something similar.
Yeah.
And my belief is that the first people to do it are never the best at it. Right. So, they can learn from our mistakes or our shortcomings, and we can learn from them. And hopefully, I'm hoping to see this become a thing where people start thinking less in terms of their own community and more in terms of their broader regional neighborhood.
Right? Is the intent to go beyond data centers too, to look at other issues that face local municipalities?
When I first got involved in this, what I saw very quickly when I noticed the broad non-partisan nature of this, I said, okay, here's an opportunity. The opportunity is to remind ourselves that we have a lot in common, even with people who don't vote the same way we do in November.
Yeah.
And realize that when we put those things aside, we can get other things done that we do agree on, and that we need to start doing that. So my mentality at that point was, when all this is over.
You say that like there's a date.
Yeah. When all this is over, I want to start something. I was thinking locally at the time, where there's a new one. What's the next thing that we can build a coalition around?
Right.
Right. And there might be a group of people who are committed to the whole thing. We're in it for the long haul. We're determined, us 20 people, we 20. Every time we're done with one issue, we get together and we figure out what's the next one.
Mm-hmm.
And then we go build a coalition around it. And that was kind of my mentality. And really, that's how Great Lakes Neighbors United, those folks in Port Washington, think about these things too. About the idea of finding that common ground and amplifying the local voice and transparency and accountability.
Mm-hmm.
And just the responsibility about large development, that the local voice should matter. And the way I put it is that people who make the decisions about things like this should be the people who live here, who work here, who go to school here, who worship together here, and not the people who look down on us and fly over us.
Yeah.
They shouldn't have that say.
So it's been a great, enlightening conversation up to this point, Blaine. I need to have you get a little more specific about the terms you used before about what is offense and what is defense.
Well, first, let me give you where the analogy comes from. Is I was trying to explain to people what the dynamic feels like when they surprise you, right? And I thought of it this way. I call it like a vertical playing field where you've got, big tech and investor-owned utilities and state government and high-powered attorneys coming downhill at a community that doesn't know what's going on and that the community themselves don't know.
Right.
And they carry that ball down, and it gets to the 10-yard line before anyone knows what's happening and before they run out on the field to try to stop it. So that's where the idea of offense and defense comes from.
Okay.
is that need to react and but now you're not prepared. So how can you even stop it?
Right. So what are the things that people can do?
Yeah.
The train is already down
Right.
the track several miles.
Right. Well, first things first is we're just getting better at not getting the train down the track as far. Part of that is more and more landowners who are reporting when someone tries to buy land from them. Right. So one of the most common calls I get is, hey, we just got word someone in town of Seymour in Eau Claire County saying that they're being offered $1 million an acre. That seriously. Oh, no, that was in Lafayette, I think, which is in Chippewa County. But and when that comes up, people are panicked. And it's good because I'm able to kind of say, hey, it sounds scary, but in reality, putting a parcel together and negotiating a deal is not something that's going to happen overnight.
Right.
It really takes a lot to get that nailed down. And they don't like to buy the land until after the zoning and annexation is a done deal, right? A lot of those, like in Menominee, it seems to me, and I never saw the deals, but the way it played out, it appeared to be that it was a sale agreement that was contingent upon certain things happening, right? And so they didn't get their money and they didn't get the deal until that happened. That's how I understood it. That's what it appeared to be. And I think that just makes sense. Again, they're putting the risk on everyone else,
right,
not on themselves.
Right.
And so when you find that out, you're like, okay, we've got time. Like they have to buy the land. They have to get it annexed. They have to get it rezoned. There has to be extensive conversations with the community already. We're already ahead of the game that we know someone's looking.
Right.
Right. And it gives us a chance. There's not vested rights to the landowner until they have filed a completed building permit. That's up to date with the rules that has been accepted, or not accepted, but that has been accepted as complete, I guess you would say. So until that moment, until they have those vested rights, you can change the rules, right? Unless you've done something else, unless you've fallen into one of their other traps that they'll use to try to say that they've got some kind of legal claim. But if you're careful about that, then you can still file that moratorium. You can still build your rules and come back and say, okay, we can look at your application now, right? So I think that's where it comes from, is we don't have to wait till the ball gets to the 10 anymore.
You were talking even further in advance.
Yeah.
About rezoning. If we were talking about a township that wanted to truly proactively be prepared if something like an offer for land for a data center was to come to them, townships could be passing an amendment to their zoning ordinance.
If they're county zoned, then they have to rely on the county. And then that becomes really tricky because there are some counties I see who are just going to do what they want to do.
Okay.
And there are other counties who really defer to the township issue by issue. And if the township doesn't want it, they turn it down. Right. And so it depends what county you're living in. I know there are counties that I'm familiar with up near home where the people have a lot of trust in their county people to protect them. Where in Grant County, we had people doing adopting village powers and putting in interim zoning because they didn't trust the county, because the county wasn't keeping them in the loop. Right. But yeah, a town that can zone, that has zoning and village powers, can do a lot. They can create they can build their nuisance ordinance around industrial nuisances. They can do a lot of police power things, like on regulating road use and weight limits and construction hours and setbacks from agricultural or whatever that they can kind of at least not make it so easy to just do whatever they want to do. Because that's what they're looking for. They're looking for a no defense is what they're looking for. They want path of least resistance.
Can any town adopt village powers?
No, any town can. Yes, any town can adopt village powers. All village powers means is that you have the power to adopt ordinances. You can do a lot of the things that villages can do, even though you're not incorporated. right? So it gives you a little more control over yourself. What Manitowoc County recognized the opportunity is to have basically like a pause and study where you're saying we are going to stop the flow of application receipt. We're not going to allow receipts and processing of applications for data centers for a period of this. But then it has to come along with, because we're going to study the issue, we're directing our staff or our plan commission or whoever to do this, and then we're going to adopt laws or rules around it before we open it back up again. If you just pass something like that and you don't follow it up with that action, then it's going to be viewed by the courts as a facade that's just meant to try to stop something without actually a good faith effort. So it's really important that people do that. It's
back to the idea of offense.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts about what people can do ahead of time as a way for their governmental unit to be prepared for a data center proposal to come into their jurisdiction?
Yeah, I mean, I think you need to demand of your local government. You need to go in and you say, we need to get protections in place, right? One thing I try to tell people is if you wait until it's time to negotiate a development agreement and your community lawyer is sitting down with lawyers from Oracle or Google or Microsoft or Meta, you've lost. You're not going to get what you want. They might even accede to certain things, right? That, yeah, we can do that, knowing that they can go back to court and get those things thrown out because there may be exactions that wouldn't even be allowed by a judge, right? And you see that kind of thing happen too. I've seen where examples of community benefit agreement items that are agreed upon, but then the developer comes back and manages to get those things thrown out because there was something shaky about it.
Yeah.
And that's the tricky part. The problem is, part of this is that these communities don't have the legal resources. Like their county attorney, their city attorney, their village attorney, their town attorney is not really equipped to, most of them aren't trained to the degree of dealing with this kind of a situation. And what you really need is someone who's more experienced in that. And sometimes they're just afraid to spend the money on it, right? Or they just don't have it.
Yeah.
So as far as the other things that people can do, it's making sure that you're very clear about what you expect from your leaders, making sure they understand that you expect them to look out for the community and not the developer, that you expect them to treat what the developer tells them with skepticism because they should. That should be their automatic. You're not doing due diligence if you're not treating every claim skeptically. That's not due diligence. And that, I think, and this is not about like those of us in the state, in the kind of the state data center community, tooting our own horns, but I really feel like we're not being used as resources for communities themselves. They're not bringing us in and asking, what have you learned that could help us? One of the major municipalities up there reached out to me directly last week, asking for help, talking about a moratorium and thoughts about it. And it's an important enough community, like from a linchpin standpoint, that what we're looking for is critical mass, right? You get a moratorium here, one here, then two here, then three here, and then pretty soon it's like musical chairs. Right. We got to get a seat before this is done.
Yeah.
We can't miss out. It's also like one of the messages I'm trying to get out is they are going to threaten to sue you. Sometimes that's going to happen.
Yeah.
It happens with towns and villages, especially. We'll sue. Well, even if they do, they have to file papers and it's going to be several months before they see you in a courtroom. So why not just let them do it? And spend that 3 months doing whatever you can to figure it out, right? And I think I was talking to a state representative yesterday who reached out to me, who was talking about, I think that she thinks that a lot of the communities don't take advantage of the insurance for these things that they can get through the League of Municipalities. And I think that's something to get the word out about too. I think there's a lot of education that needs to go to local governments.
Yeah.
Period.
I think that's part of the issue is that, and that we talked about earlier as well, is that local municipalities just don't know that they've got resources in the League of Municipalities, for instance, or
Right.
other, or even private citizen groups. And we need to get that word out. So,
well, they also don't understand that, because, we talked about the one way of creating a new zone. The other one is a conditional use permit, but the conditional use permit has been really watered down over the last few years, and it really favors the developer now. Especially with regard to data centers. There was an Act 67 in 2023. I believe that's right. That basically says, yeah, you could do a conditional use permit, but every standard that you're making a condition has to be objective and measurable, and has to be encoded in your zones. Like it used to be that you could create special conditions as you went, right? Like you could adapt to the developer and make special conditions. Now, no, if it's not already in your code as a condition, then you can't use it. And what I'm finding is that a lot of communities aren't really aware of that change, right? So they haven't updated their conditional use permit standards. They haven't updated their comprehensive plans, which is another great way to give themselves legal cover, is to make sure that their comprehensive plan is up to date, and that it gives them something they can point to and say, this is the reason we can't do it.
yeah.
Because what you really want, what would be ideal is if when you send it to your plan commission, if your plan commission looks at your plan and says, nope, we can't do it because it's not consistent with our comprehensive plan. Because when you have that, you've got a lot of cover to just say no.
I guess I just want to give you, a chance to, as we wrap this up, to say, what do you think is the most important lessons this this state can be learning from the experience that you've been having?
The most important lesson. Well, I think we're learning them quickly, but we're learning them in real time quickly now. But part of why we're learning them is we're realizing that we recognize this. I know in Western Wisconsin, we recognize it as a much larger version of frack sand mining. And also now it's also echoing Foxconn kind of vibes about are we going to have these sites that can't be remediated, that are millions of square feet, and what does that look like? I think what we need to learn is that economic development can't be the end all and be all. As a culture, we're just too worried about money and what we think it means. We're too obsessed about the economy. And sometimes I want to say, when people say it's the economy stupid, I want to say it's not about the stupid economy. Because what matters, what I think, what's been happening now as people are facing difficult times financially, is it feels like people are reconnecting with the idea of other things, of community, of the things that enrich their lives. And things get expensive, but we find other ways to enjoy our life and find joy. And when we focus so much, and I think that's the thing. I think people think that they're doing good for their community by getting this economic boon that they really don't know if it's going to be an economic boon. And they're not asking, what are we going to lose in the process? Like, what's the trade-off? So I think that is a lesson that I'm hoping we're learning. And I think the biggest lesson is that we are just plain stronger when we unite around the things that we love and we have in common than we are by dividing over the things about which we differ. And that it is okay to put away your viewpoints on this social issue or that social issue or this economic issue and that economic issue, and come together about that thing that you can do together. Because when we start doing that, we learn to trust someone that we automatically didn't trust before. And the minute you start trusting someone that you didn't trust before, then you start attempting things that you never would have attempted before. And we're not going to get anywhere until we start teaching the people who we send to Madison and to Washington by doing it ourselves and showing them how to do it.
Good points. And with that, it sounds like a good place for us to wrap it up. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
Really
thank you.
being here.
That was great. I love doing this.